Oh, well, hello. Welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited to share this exciting conversation that I had with Alex Banayan, who is the author of The Third Door, The Wild Quest to Uncover How the World's Most Successful People Launch Their Careers. His story was so fascinating. It's actually a much longer interview than I normally do because I was sitting there like, no way. Anyway, you might have heard him. Maybe you've already read this book. I hope so. I'm listening to it on tape right now and absolutely am loving it. Just really the thinking outside the box at such a young age, which is basically what his story is. The third door is that most of us think that there's two ways to get into something, right? So think about it like a club where there's the front door where everybody waits, the line is around the block. There's the VIP door where you got to know somebody, you got to have money. And his theory, and interviewing all of these famous people from Bill Gates to Jessica Alba to Steven Spielberg to a zillion people, that what he's come to is that there is a third door. And that might be down a nasty alley, you got to jump over a dumpster and bang on the door a million times, but there's a different way of making your dreams come true. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this interview with Alex Banayan as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. All right. So Alex, welcome to the Terri Cole Show.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Super psyched. Okay. So I already told everyone about your book, the name, but I want to hear from you. What is the origin story, your origin story that inspired you at such a young age to be in pursuit of this holy grail of finding out how really successful people became really successful?
It started when, frankly, I was going through a life crisis, a pretty early life crisis. I was 18 years old, a freshman in college, and I was spending every day lying on my dorm room bed, staring up at the ceiling. And I don't know if you've gone through the what do I want to do with my life crisis, but when it hits you really hard and hits you really fast. And to understand why I was going through it, you have to understand that I'm the son of Persian Jewish immigrants, which pretty much means I came out of the womb, my mom cradled me in her arms, and then she stamped MD on my behind and sent me on my way. You might think it's funny, but I wore scrubs to school for Halloween when I was a kid and thought I was cool. That was my childhood. I was that kid. And in high school, I checked all the boxes. I studied for the SATs, took all the biology classes. I even went to pre-med summer camp. So by the time I got to college, no, it's true. They have on UCLA's campus, they have a camp for kids who want to not have a social life, and it's called pre-med summer camp. And I thought that would be a great idea to really advance my life forward. So by the time I got to college, I'm the pre-med of pre-meds. I remember very quickly, lying on my dorm room bed, looking at this towering stack of biology books, feeling like they're sucking the life out of me. And at first I assumed, maybe I'm just being lazy. But eventually I began to wonder, maybe I'm not on my path. Maybe I'm on a path somebody else has placed me on, and I'm just rolling down. So now not only do I not know what I want to do with my life, I have no idea how the people who I looked up to, how they did it. How did Bill Gates sell his first piece of software out of his dorm room when nobody knew his name? How did Spielberg become the youngest director in Hollywood history without a single hit under his belt? This is what they don't teach you in school. So I just assumed there had to be a book with the answers. So I went to the library and I just started ripping through business books and biographies of health books, assuming there had to be a book, not on a particular age in life, but really a stage. When you're starting anything new, when you're trying to break through, no one's taking your calls, no one's taking your meetings. How do you find a way to break through? And eventually I was left empty-handed. So that's when my naive 18-year-old thinking kicked in. And I thought, well, if no one's written the book I'm dreaming of reading, why not write it myself? And I thought it'd be super simple. I thought I would just, call Bill Gates, interview him, interview everybody else. I'll be done in a few months. That I assumed would be the easy part. The hard part, I figured, was getting the money to fund this journey. I was buried in student loan debt. I was all out of bar mitzvah cash. So there had to be a way to make some quick money. So Terri, 2 nights before final exams, I'm in the library doing what everyone does in the library right before finals. I'm on Facebook. And, I'm on Facebook and I see somebody offering free tickets to The Price is Right. Now, I of course knew of the game show, everybody's seen it. It's all I could watch when I was homesick from school in fourth grade. I remember the only thing on TV at the time, but I'd never seen a full episode before. But I went to school in Los Angeles, not too far from where the show filmed. And my first thought was, what if I go on the show and win some money to fund this book? Not my brightest idea. Plus, plus I had a problem. I'd never seen a full episode before. I had finals in 2 days. I told myself it was a dumb idea and to not think about it. But, I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where an idea, no matter how ridiculous, for some reason, it keeps clawing back into your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So almost to prove to myself that this was a bad idea, I remember taking out my spiral notebook. I'm sitting at this round table in the corner of the library. And I take out my spiral notebook and I write best and worst case scenarios to prove to myself this is a bad idea. And I remember writing, worst case scenarios, fail finals, get kicked out of pre-med, lose financial aid, mom stops talking to me, no, mom kills me. There's like 20 cons. And the only pro was maybe win enough money to fund this dream. And it's almost as if somebody had tied a rope around my gut and was slowly pulling in a direction. So that night, I decided to do the logical thing and pull an all-nighter to study. But I didn't study for finals. I studied how to hack The Price is Right. And I went on the show the next day and did this ridiculous strategy. And I ended up winning the whole showcase showdown, winning a sailboat, selling that boat. And that's how I funded the book.
Stop.
And that's how the journey set off. It took 2 years to track down Bill Gates, 3 years to track down Lady Gaga. And when I had started the journey, there was no part of me looking for that, one key to success. Right? We've all seen those business books, those TED Talks, and normally I just roll my eyes. But what ended up happening over 7 years of research and interviews is I started realizing every single one of these people treats life and business and success the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
And the analogy that came to me is that it's sort of like getting into a nightclub. There's always 3 ways in. There's the first door, the main entrance, where the line curves around the block, where 99% of people wait around hoping to get in. That's the first door. And then there's the second door, the VIP entrance, where the billionaires and celebrities go through. For some reason, society has this way of making us feel like those are the only 2 ways in. You're either born into it or you just wait your turn like everybody else. But what I've learned, and what I'm sure you've seen in your own career, is that there's always the third door. And it's an entrance where you jump out of line, run down the alley, bang on the door 100 times, crack open the window, go through the kitchen. There's always a way in. And it doesn't matter if that's how Bill Gates sold his first piece of software, how Lady Gaga got her first record deal. They all took the third door.
I love that so much. And I have to say, it's so true. It's such a perfect analogy because people telling you, it's always the people who did door 1 or 2 are always the ones telling you they're only doors. Like they're not the people who should be asking. So you ended up asking all the people who knew there were 3 doors, right? You're like,
I've never thought of that.
Oh, fact though, right?
In 10 years of work, that's exactly right.
But it's a secret. Exactly right. Alex, it sounds like a secret society, but it's not, right? Because you accessed this information because you were the original in your own life person, knowing that there was another way. Like you didn't go, how do people interview celebrities? You're like, I'm just going to do it the way that I think they do it, rather than, let me see, maybe their publicist will put me in touch with them. Probably not. Most likely, no. You wouldn't even get past the assistant, correct?
I tried. It didn't work. Yeah. The first month of the journey was me emailing press@billgates.com. It didn't really pan out.
Exactly. But I love the whole mindset, which is thinking outside of the box. But what I find fascinating, not to be a psychotherapist, but I cannot help it.
Please.
What do you think gave you the impetus at that young age? Now, I agree with you. We can all look back at our younger self and just be like, I was naive. I just was like, whatever, this is how I'm going to do it. But what do you attribute within you that made you really pursue this? Because I'm positive during those 7 years when shit was not happening or whatever, when you were getting going, your mother wasn't pumped that you were not in, becoming a doctor, right? You were not making tons of money or probably any money, or you were doing it somehow. But
No.
do you know what I mean? Like, so what is it? How did you weather those storms and continue on and for 3 years until you could get Gaga on the phone?
You know, I think motivations evolve. Sort of like a garden, they grow, some new ones come about, some unhealthy ones die off.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if I had to sort of like a therapist analyze the 18-year-old Alex, the different, it's super different than the person who was, 5 years into the journey, getting rejected, had to hold on for dear life and make it through, which is very different than the person today who, for some reason, 10 years in still jumps out of bed and wants to keep doing this. So I think the motivations have evolved. What I do know is that, you mentioned particularly the times when you are getting punched in the face, your mom's not happy, your publisher is worried that this is going to be a complete failure, you're not making money, and you're just getting a complete firing squad of rejections right at you. I'll tell you what happened in those moments. All of the, for lack of a better word, all of the more selfish motivations I did have, which I had them. I wasn't aware that I had them.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware that when I was 18, I wanted to feel special and I wanted to belong and I wanted to be different and I wanted external validation. I wasn't aware of all those things.
Yeah.
But they existed. But I'll tell you, when things get really hard, and not like difficult, but I mean on the floor, and this is not exaggeration, on the floor of a Motel 6, sobbing in Omaha, Nebraska, while a cockroach walks past your face. Like, those moments did happen.
Mm-hmm.
Those things fall off really quickly. And the only thing that I could hold on to, literally, and by the way, there were moments I would say to myself, I give up, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
But a few days later, for some reason, something would pull me back in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always almost like a single thread, my belief that there were people outside of me, other than me, who would benefit from this mission.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is I wasn't even aware how much, I would tell myself that I cared about that, but you can't really see if you actually care until you're in the moment. And, I've heard, boxers talk about the same thing when they're getting punched in the face and want to give up. It's actually the thought of their children being able to use the prize money, not them using the prize money, their children using the prize money. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning talks about that the people who survived unimaginable hardships, which I have, can't even imagine going through, were people who were doing it not just for themselves, they were doing it for something outside of themselves.
Right.
And human beings, whether we're aware of it or not, do get motivation and perseverance and resilience from doing things for others, whether you're aware of it or not. So in the moment, I was not self-aware of what was going on, but in hindsight, and it's just clear for me now that the book's out, like seeing the Amazon ranking of the book go up and down or the sales numbers feels good. But what makes me tear up still is getting a message from an 18-year-old saying, this is the book I was dreaming of reading.
Yep. It's so interesting. It's like how in some ways that it really is your purpose, that we can have many purposes, but there's something about your dharma when the thing that satisfies you the most or lights you up the most or makes you the most emotional or feel the most satisfied is that feedback that you impacted someone else's present and their future. So you wrote the book you thought would be out there, wasn't out there, but that you wished for, and then to have it be received by lots and lots and lots of people the way you had intended, how you hoped in your heart. I don't know, that just makes me feel like it's along the lines of your purpose in life, because it has to be, there's got to be something that makes us keep going when all things are pointing to that we should not. You know,
right. This is a bad idea. This is logically a bad idea.
Yes. And you can always find people to tell you what a terrible idea it is. And so I love the idea of finding the people who also think outside the box, which really is what it sounds like from what you just shared. And thank you so much for sharing all of that, that you were attracted to the people, the third door people. Like you literally were attracted to those folks. That's who you wanted to know about. So what do you think, if we were just talking about others, people listening, maybe
Sure.
people don't know about the book, what is it that gets in the way of people doing this, of people either dreaming big or achieving their dreams, like actually going for it?
It's taken me many, many, many years to come to this realization. Because, there's a lot of obvious reasons people don't, go after their dreams. The most obvious: resources, circumstance, talent. There's a lot of things. Hell, there's a lot of things. And they're all real. They're all real. If you are working 2 jobs to help pay for your mother's chemotherapy, that is real. I'm not saying it's not real.
Yep.
What I will say, though, is there's something underneath that. Even what's actually more interesting for me is when I look at someone whose parents are billionaires, they went to Harvard, and for some reason they can't get themselves off the couch. That to me is just as fascinating.
Yep.
Because they exist. I meet them. They stand and just like everyone else say, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Sadly, sometimes they just have money that can distract them from that calling. But yeah, they have that feeling too. What I'll tell you is that from 10 years of research, the number one reason I've seen most people not being able to take the third door, not going after their dreams, has nothing to do with how hard it is to run down the alley, bang on the door. It's hard, but it's not because of that. People are more capable than they give themselves credit for. The number one reason most people don't go after their dreams is because of their fear of leaving the line for the first door. It's because of their fear of leaving the line for the first door. And if you think about it, it makes complete sense. The first door is where your parents taught you to stand. It's where your school gave you got an A for standing in the first door. You got sent to the principal for taking the third door. You got yelled at for even speaking out while you were in line at the first door. The first door is where all your friends are. God forbid you are successful. It's where you're getting your money to pay for your family. So there's actually many, many, many good reasons. Physiologically too, it's well lit, well paved. There's street lamps, there's a security guard. It's much safer. So I'm not saying you're crazy. I'm saying you're a human being for being afraid of leaving that line for the first door. However, people are always shocked that it's scarier when they actually do take the leap. The results are unanimous. It was scarier in my head than it was when I did it.
Without a doubt. I also want to add something that when you're in line at the first door, so much of the time clients would say, but I've already invested this amount of time of my life. I'm already
about to make a partner.
Yes, I'm already at this level of mastery is another thing that there's a lot of in my clientele, a lot of perfectionism where I'm thinking about doing something I'm not masterful at. I'm like, man, you can get masterful at anything you pretty much that you put your mind to. But again, it's the fear of losing what you've worked so hard to gain. But I always look at it like you can't possibly lose it because you did those things and it is your life. Like it's already within you, those experiences. The gumption it took to become a successful lawyer or to become, like you said, right before you're becoming a partner, you're going to bring that work ethic, that single focus into hopefully the next thing. But I just wondered your thought, and I 100% agree. At least I've seen something very similar in my therapy practice of this fear of, we know what we're losing. We are not positive of what we're gaining. But this life of what we know, if your heart is actually the third door, if your heart is actually doing something else, if that really is your dharma, this becomes the golden handcuffs.
The golden handcuffs is an interesting way to think about it, because everyone knows the golden handcuffs as a monetary system. Your job pays you so much so you don't leave. We all understand that. But we don't talk about the golden handcuffs of the emotional and social structure, where you were taught since you were a child that you are loved because you're perfect.
Mm.
And God forbid someone with a beautiful house and a beautiful family and a beautiful job on the outside abandons that external facade of perfection in search of running down the alley where they're going to be covered in mud, in a dark, where it's not going to, on the outside, frankly, it won't look that good in the beginning. No one's going to be congratulating you when you launch your podcast and there's 5 listeners. They were sending you much more positive affirmation when you're at the holiday Christmas party, the company Christmas party making partner, but you were dying inside.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's some people who that is their dharma, which is amazing. But we're giving an example of sometimes the thing that gives us all of the positive affirmation from society, from our family, from our partners, from our friends, isn't for us. And the reason we keep procrastinating, even taking that class, even taking that podcasting class, even taking that retreat, is we are so terrified of losing our sense of belonging and our sense of love that we've been able to cultivate by waiting in line for the first door.
Yep. I really did personally experience this whole entire thing before I became a psychotherapist. I was running a talent agency, negotiating contracts for supermodels, celebrities. That was like my job, my life, my career that I'd worked really hard for. And I just kept thinking, when I get to the right place, I'm going to feel the way that I want to feel. And then I got to the top of the heap and I was like, crap, I still don't feel the way that I want to feel. And when I had to tell my father that I was quitting my job and going to grad school to become a psychotherapist, he was like, literally his verbatim, he said, sounds weird. I was like, well, lucky I don't need you to pay for it.
Yeah.
And weird to you, satisfying to me. And it took me probably 3 years before I made that choice for all of the things, Alex, that you just said. Not just because externally people were like, that's the coolest job, Naomi Campbell. It was also being financially free, being able to travel, sort of like this, what you've created in life, like this cachet of I can go to the fashion shows, which I never did because I didn't give a crap about that world. I really didn't, but I could have if I wanted to. I mean, it was so anyway, I feel so identified with the truth about what you are sharing. And I'm so incredibly grateful that you wrote this book. And I want to hear from you. So let's just pick a couple of what are the gems? Because of course, people need to just go buy the book, which is you can buy everywhere. So just go to Amazon or wherever fine books are sold and get the book, which is called The Third Door, which I told you at the top, The Wild Quest to Uncover How the World's Most Successful People Launch Their Careers. There you go. That is the name of the book. Go get it right now if this is calling to you. But what would you say are the top, maybe 3 gems of wisdom, and from whom?
Well, it's interesting. First of all, that was very kind of you to say. It does mean a lot. There's the big stories of, and they're funny, chasing Larry King through a grocery store, hacking Warren Buffett's shareholders meeting. There's something about what you had just said, though, that I want to keep going, because I feel like you and I, and from very different worlds, ended up in similar places. Mm-hmm. And something is telling me there's someone listening to this right now who is on that same path too. And what I wish I could have known when I was starting out on that journey is I was waiting for a moment where my fear would go away, or that I can master my fear or eradicate my fear. Because I'll tell you, when I was a kid, if you ask my sisters what it was like growing up with me, they'll tell you I was the most scared kid they'd ever meet. I had a nightlight on until I was 12. I never went on roller coasters. I even gave my fear a name. I called it the flinch. It was that feeling in, elementary school when your throat tightens up and your mouth is wired shut and your feet turn to stone. And it started off as just feeling different as a kid and being afraid of rejection. And as I grew up, it grew up with me. And that stuff follows you into your own career. And when I started out working on the third door, at the most inconvenient times, it would come in and I would feel paralyzed. Mm. So naturally, a question I had for all the people who I interviewed was, how did you become so fearless? I look at Elon Musk or Sheryl Sandberg. They had to have been fearless, or else how else they have done what they accomplished? And every single conversation not only surprised me, actually confused me. Not only were every single one of these people afraid when they were getting started, they were terrified the whole way through. And that didn't make any sense to me. And what it took me many years to realize is that there is a giant difference between being fearless and being courageous. The words sound similar, fearlessness and courage. They sound similar, but the definitions are actually very, very different. Fearlessness is the absence of fear. It's jumping off a cliff and not thinking about it. That is idiotic. I do not want to be your friend. That is a very dangerous situation. That's fearlessness. Courage, on the other hand, is when you're consumed by fear and you acknowledge it, you analyze the consequences, and then at the end of the day, you decide you care so much about it, you're still going to take just one thoughtful step forward anyway.
Yeah.
And at least for people like me, courage is something within reach. It's not easy, but it's within reach. Fearlessness, not only can I never get there, I've learned to realize it's not the goal.
I love that distinction so much, Alex. So those of you listening or watching this on YouTube, really let that sink, really let that settle, because it is not about being fearless. And I don't know anyone who's done anything great in their lives who didn't say, I found a way to relate differently to my fear. Instead of my fear meaning abort the mission, I realized I was going to need to make friends. My fear is there to protect me, maybe to make sure I'm okay. And I'm always reassuring my fear, like, hey, it's cool. I appreciate you. I got it. We're good. Like, it's not going anywhere, because this is a part from a psychological point of view and physiological point of view, of course. This is a part of the human condition. This is how we stay protected, but definitely not giving fear carte blanche to dictate your actions. So I loved what you said about thoughtfully weighing out the consequences. And it's kind of like when I was switching careers, I said, how do you feel about being poor again? Because I'd made a ton of money and I had spent a ton of money. I traveled, I did whatever the hell I wanted. I literally started grad school with, I think, $900 in my bank account in 1986. But I was like, yeah, that was scary. Thank God my apartment was rent stabilized, but I just thought, can I be poor? And I never like had very expensive apartments. I never lived this big life, even though I made a lot of money because I wanted to travel and do what I wanted. And I was really grateful at that point that I didn't. But when I asked the important question, how do you feel about being kind of broke for kind of the next couple of years? Because for sure, that's what it's going to be. And I was like, I really had to sit down with myself and go, that's okay. It's not the stuff. It's not the stuff. Like, I can be very frugal. I can figure out how to eat rice and beans or whatever I need to. It's about the experience. Do I want to have this experience of grad school at NYU, of doing something that I'm super lit up about, which, I took 2 courses non-matriculating prior to. actually, committing to the degree to make sure, like, do I really, really want to do this?
Which is great.
Blow up my whole entire life. But I love that advice, Alex, of let's look at the difference between being fearless. Don't expect to not be afraid, right? Dig deep and really visualize, what could it be like if I take this next step? And I love the idea too. And I always would say this with clients who were looking to make a big move, whether it was getting out of a bad situation in a romantic sense, whether it was changing careers, that every day taking some action, you said, mindful action towards your goal, that there is something so powerful, because to me, this is what keeps hope and possibility alive. It doesn't have to be, every day that we're changing the world, but we're doing something, because that tells our inner self, like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still doing this.
That's
so
it.
so who else? What do we think? Is there anything from Jessica Alba? I love her so much.
That was one of my favorite interviews that has really, been in my heart ever since.
Do tell.
So, with Jessica Alba, there's, of course, what everyone knows of her. She's this award-winning actress, famous movie star. And she's the founder of the Honest Company, which just went IPO, billion-dollar company. So what was fascinating about Jessica Alba, even going into it, was she didn't climb one mountain, and then wait until late in her life and climb a second mountain. She climbed two mountains at the same time. I remember one time I was walking through an airport and she was on the cover of Forbes magazine and the cover of Shape magazine in the same month. So, two very different worlds that she had been able to climb to at the top of both. And when I went into that interview, I wanted to learn how she found her fuel to climb that second mountain at the same time. Now, this was towards the end of the journey of the third door. And I was sitting in the lobby of the Honest Company office, waiting for the interview to begin. And frankly, I was struggling a lot to stay present. Because as much as I knew that this interview was going to be very powerful and I needed to focus, it sadly wasn't the biggest thing on my mind. I had just come back from the hospital earlier where I had taken my dad for one of his first rounds of chemotherapy. And my dad had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And I can remember very vividly the feeling, particularly in that early phase, where it felt like I was seeing someone I love, drowning in the ocean. I'm on a life raft, but they're drowning, and no matter how far I reach out my hand, there was no way I could reach it. And I remember sitting there in the lobby of the Honest Company telling myself, for the next hour, just compartmentalize, focus. This is your job. This is your career. This is your purpose. This is your mission. Do whatever it takes to focus on the interview and just not think about cancer or death. And sure enough, it was time for the interview, and I get taken down the hallway, and everything about Jessica Alba's office is bright and positive. Sunlight is flowing in. There's butterflies on the wall. The word honesty is spelled out, on another wall. Everyone just seems very happy and positive. I enter Jessica Alba's office. She's sitting there on a couch. We greet each other and we sit down. And I just know that I have to ask her a question that will guarantee the interview will stay positive. So I knew from, I'd done all my research, and I knew in my research that whenever she speaks about her mother, she speaks very positively. So I was just going to give her a layup opening question. And I said, tell me, what's the best thing you've learned from your mother? She thinks about it and she sort of looks down at her feet. And then she looks back at me and goes, I learned from my mom to cherish every moment you have with your parents, because you never know when it will be the last. And I just want to, double over in pain.
Right.
And of course, she continues. I learned from my mom, you better watch what you say, because you never know when it's the last thing you'll say to your parent. And she's just going on and on and on. I had done all this research on her. She had never responded like this. So I was just very, thrown. So I had to grab the steering wheel and take the interview in another direction because I was in too much pain. So I knew the easiest question for her because she's answered it a million times. I said, "How did you start the Honest Company?" I know the answer. I could say her answer. It's she had a baby and she wanted her baby to be happy and healthy. It's a beautiful answer. So I was just letting her change the subject. Again, for reasons I may never understand. She goes, "I was thinking about mortality."
No.
And she goes on to explain to me that when she was pregnant, it was the first time she ever realized how close life and death are, how thin that line is. As you're trying to keep this baby inside of you alive, how many ways there's going to be for it to slip through your fingers. And that started bringing back for her all of her deepest childhood fears. Because what I didn't know is she used to be in and out of the hospital when she was a kid. She would have an inhaler on the side of the soccer field. Her mom was sick and would go to the hospital. Her aunt had cancer. Her uncle had cancer. Her grandparents had cancer. And she is sitting there talking about death and cancer unto the point that I literally just break down. And I tell her, my dad just got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And normally someone's response would be to, lower their voice and say, "I'm so sorry." For some reason, that was the opposite thing that she did. She got her hand, slapped it down on the table, and just yelled, "Fuck." And a weight was lifted off my shoulders I didn't even know existed. And from that point forward, this was no longer an interview, it was a conversation. And she started telling me about her family's history with being sick. I was telling her about my dad's experience. We were comparing notes on what it's like to be the kid of a parent who is sick but insists on drinking Diet Coke still. we were just in it together. And we're talking about that. And then sure enough, she goes on to explain to me about, she keeps going on and on and on about how her biggest fear was being sick as a kid. And then there was a moment, towards the end of the, halfway through the interview, where she had these glass walls in her office where you could see the entire office space. So you could see all the employees through her office. There was no blinds, no doors. And I just stopped her, and something just compelled me to say, "Jessica, you're telling me that the reason all these people have jobs is because you grabbed your biggest childhood fear in the eye. You looked it in the eyes, grabbed it by the collar, slammed it down, and said, 'What am I going to do about you?' Because the mission of the Honest Company is to create products so people don't get sick in their own house."
Right.
And she now looked like I just lifted a weight off her shoulders. And she said yes, and she was going on, and we started talking even faster now. And I had this epiphany that all these other celebrities normally make a business that's a reflection of their mountaintops. A makeup line, a clothing line, a fragrance line, merchandise to reflect their ivory tower lifestyle. Jessica Alba had the courage to go to her deepest, darkest childhood pain and say, "What am I going to do about you?"
Right.
And that's how she was able to climb her second mountain.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story. Oh my God. I was excited. I was crying. I was like, that is so moving. The humanity that she also was able to do, the vulnerability that she was able to share in that moment, and yours as well. This book is amazing. I'm so grateful that you spent so much time with us today. So where can everybody find you?
First of all, the feeling is very mutual. It felt really good to be able to be with you today. And if anyone's listening and like this and end up getting the book or reading the book because of this, let me know on social. It's all the same: Instagram, Twitter. It's at Alex Banayan. And the book is, like you said, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Audible, however you like your books, it's there.
Thank you. To be continued. I appreciate you, Alex.
Thank you. The feeling is so mutual.